no music.
All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and you might have heard Arlen just say no music. I can't figure that out. I know the music was going out there. I think maybe I have the filter set to the wrong number, Arlen. Maybe I'll have to play around with that because you should have heard the music. How you doing? It's great to see you, by the way.
Thank you, Hal. It's nice to be back. I've only been back probably less than a week now from Europe, but and all sorts of things are going on. I mean, I can't believe all the news that's happening at the moment. The inauguration, the fires in California, there's, the football games. There's just so much to talk about, and we only have an hour to do it. So let's get going.
Yeah, and you didn't mention what is always first in my mind is the situation in the Middle East, specifically Gaza, the ongoing, as I've been calling it, Holocaust, genocide, whatever term you like. And I just will say real quick, Arlen, I know you want to get into the news, and we'll get there. One of the ways I've changed up my program is I'm actually broadcasting the full hour live, as I've done, but I'm also cutting it up, editing it into smaller chunks, which to make it more accessible for people who don't have an hour or more sometimes to spare to give to the program. One thing I've noticed, Arlen, I don't know if this will surprise you, talking to somebody about it, is the segments I do about Israel are very unpopular. Not that any of my segments are particularly popular, but one I did on Friday about TikTok has got hundreds of clicks, whereas I think the one I did on Israel has one, and I am not exaggerating there. So, do you have any thoughts on that? I have thoughts, but I want to know if you have any thoughts.
Well, you've always been a contrarian on the Israeli-Gaza thing, and you're tougher on Israel than almost anybody else, and you're not shy about it. So, and you're going to be in the minority. But I'll tell you,
I don't understand that. I honestly, how could I be too tough on a country that is completely laid waste to folks that it's been persecuting for 75 years? I don't get it. How am I too tough on them?
I know it's that what we've done over there is awful, and there's no, or what Israel has done is awful, and there's no excuse for it. But there's so many other things going on. Perhaps that's the reason. And also, I mean, the other side is not real. It's hard to be sympathetic to a lot of the, Arab countries who have, condemned Israel and told, promised to destroy them and all that. So, it's not like good versus evil. It's not that easy.
Well, it's certainly evil versus innocent, right? I mean, you have children who are being shot in the head and the chest by the Israeli military.
I don't disagree with you, Hal. I'm shocked at what we've done and what we've allowed to be done by Israel by giving them all the support that they seem to want. And it's a mistake.
It's Halitics with Arlen. Arlen back. So glad to have him. And I thought we might be waiting until next week, but you were chomping at the bit to come back on the program. So we're glad to have you. Just real quick, even before the ceasefire, as far as I know, the ceasefire has been holding, and I'm very, 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 very relieved. And I just hope, I don't pray, but I just so want this killing to end, and I want there to be peace. And we see before the ceasefire on Sunday, 23 more killed over the weekend, nearly 47,000 dead, Arlen. It really is just one of the worst episodes in American history, authored, in my view, primarily by Harris Biden, and obviously Antony Blinken bearing a huge amount of the blame as well. 46,899 identified Gazans killed since October 7th. And that number is continuing to rise, by the way. It's actually higher because now that the ceasefire is in effect, they're digging bodies out of the rubble. Arlen, I have some videos, but I don't know where to go with this. Just a couple thoughts. Before we get into Trump and the inauguration, do you give Trump any credit? I know you don't. I know you hate the guy. I know you're afraid of him. I know you view him as the end of the world, possibly. Maybe that's too strong. So I don't want to put words in your mouth. But are you willing to say, well, this is a good thing that he helped accomplish, so maybe it won't be as bad as I thought?
Well, yeah. You may be surprised to know that I feel the same way that you just said, that Trump may have had may have been a factor just because he's so unpredictable and he's talking about, terrible things happening if they don't come up with a solution before he's in office. So I'm sure he scared a lot of people. He scared, the Palestinians, the Gazans, the Israelis. So yeah, I would give him credit along with Biden, who and the Biden administration did all the negotiating. So I think they both deserve some credit.
Well, did Biden do the negotiating? My understanding is that it was Trump's guy, Witkoff, who went over there and really laid into Netanyahu. That's what Haaretz remarked. That's what Haaretz said, that he told Bibi, I don't care about your goddamn Sabbath. You're going to meet with me right now. And there was a sense in Israel that there's a new sheriff in town who wasn't going to just put up with their nonsense. Even Maggie Haberman, the well-known Trump hater supreme for the New York Times, couldn't quite avoid giving him some credit, acknowledging that he wanted the ceasefire. And indeed, let me see if I can get it so everything, well, as you said, maybe Biden's team negotiated it to a degree, but they've been negotiating this for 8 months and got nowhere with it. It kind of tells you how bad they are at negotiating, that Trump comes in and within a few days, there's a deal. But I'm probably missing something. What am I missing?
No, it's a big surprise. I think people didn't really expect this to happen, but it's happening. It's hard to believe that Netanyahu would give in even a little bit, and same thing with the Hamas. So, we don't know. It could fall apart tomorrow, but so far it's a good start. We've got 3 hostages out, and there'll be a lot more negotiating done. So, it's hard to say for sure what's going to happen. We'll just have to watch and hope for the best.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very fair characterization of where we are. We just have to watch and hope for the best. I do ask you to subscribe if you haven't already. There's the subscribe button. Quick housekeeping note. Ari has urged me to put this video on Instagram, and I did look into that. In fact, I upped my Restream account from basic or free to premium so that I could put it on Instagram, but Instagram makes it very, very difficult. So I looked into X as well, Twitter. I actually would prefer to be on Twitter than Instagram, but that requires a premium account. So I'm still in the process of figuring out the best way to distribute the program. Arlen, hopefully 2025 will be a good year, not just for the United States, but more importantly for Halitics.
I'm very disturbed by the big tech companies and what they're doing. I think Instagram, I heard, was owned by Facebook. Is that correct?
It is. And that's another reason I'm not really big on going on Instagram, because if I'm on Facebook, which I am, do I need to be on Instagram? They're kind of, I guess, sister platform. And
they're all, they're just giving in to Trump. They're giving him all the money he wants. They're, kissing up to him, and it's sad to see because they've got a lot of power, but they also know that Trump could maybe limit their power somewhat. So, they're just going for their profits and to make sure that they're going to be okay.
So, Arlen, speaking of tech, any thoughts on the TikTok ban? I mentioned that video has gotten a lot of hits. People seem to be pretty interested in. Have you thought about? I don't know they've ever watched a TikTok video, to be honest with you.
No, I'm not real informed about TikTok. I just noticed that Trump, had some success on it. He had a lot of followers, and so that's probably why he's doing what he's doing. It's always transactional with Trump, as you know, and if he thinks he can make some money or can help him in some way, then he's going to, try to keep TikTok as it is.
All right, you see the like button, the little thumbs up. I'm trying to play around with my graphics a little bit. Didn't get, and I'm going to put together a graphic that says go to Halitics on Facebook as well. That's a lot of fun and getting a lot of hits. I'm really trying to keep it friendly, safe space, Arlen. One of our posters there makes it a little bit more difficult, but he does add something as well. So I'm trying to keep him on board, but just a little cleaner. And I did say him, so it's not them, but it is a person. Click the like button. Arlen is always appropriate. I don't always agree with him, but he's always appropriate on Facebook. And you can read more what Arlen posts, both at Halitics, of course, but also our thought leader at the bigpicturereport.com. I called you California's thought leader, Arlen. So that's kind of a step up from just thought leader. Now you're California or California's. Because that would suggest, if you're a California thought leader, it could be 10, 15, 20. But if you're California's thought leader, you're the only one.
Well, California is the biggest state, 30 million people. I'm happy to be the main thought leader if you're going to designate me as such.
I actually got a call from Bill Monning, the former California State Senate leader, majority leader of the California State Senate, friend of mine, personal friend. He did not take thought leader well when I said you were he was okay that you're a thought leader, but he didn't like the fact that I was saying you were the state thought leader. He feels that he maybe deserves that. So there's a little controversy here, Arlen.
Yeah, we'll battle it out. Yeah, Bill Monning and I go back a long ways, particularly with my wife teaching his daughter. So, so I've known him for a long, long time.
Yeah, well, for whatever reason, he doesn't want you to be the thought leader for the state. But listen, Arlen, with all due respect, if Bill Monning ever called me up and said he wanted to be the official Halitics thought leader, we'd have to come up with a new nickname for you. I'll be honest with you.
I don't know, Hal. I might rebel. I may protest. I might drop off the air. I don't know. We'll see.
Wow. He's playing that guest card. You are the regular and he is not. So you do have some pull. All right. I guess, is he our new thought leader, Arlen? This is the new president. I don't think he does much thinking, to tell you the truth, Hal. He just reacts. You made a great point. Before I play the video, I meant to say it. He's in totally, I won't say 100% transactional, but 95%. And that decision with respect to TikTok, where he says, hey, I want to get TikTok back on. I'm going to reverse the ban. I'm going to do this. That's because he views it as a political opportunity. I agree. But I also would say, I think he's right. I think the decision to ban TikTok was a mistake, both legislatively. I don't agree with the policy was, but also I think it was a political miscalculation by the Democrats to go along with the Republicans who really pushed this even harder.
Yeah, I mean it's a problem because being owned by the Chinese, and when the Chinese are our major rivals, and if they have access to, American software and all this, all our information, and that's got to be a problem for the United States.
But my son was pointing out that the U.S. Case against TikTok, when it was argued before the Supreme Court, was wholly speculative. They couldn't come up with any specific examples of harm that had befallen the U.S. because of the TikTok infiltration into our social media market, nor were they even able to identify any, imminent threat. This is what my son said. I haven't followed it, but he's pretty smart. I give him a lot of credit. He follows these things, and he was unable. He said it was all speculative, and that said, the risk of harm is clear, right? I mean, this is a place where people express their views, and now they won't have, or they will now for a while because Trump reversed the ban.
Would it be so bad if TikTok was owned by an American company or American leader? I mean, I can't see that it would ruin ruin TikTok. So I think, it's worth looking into and, maybe banning the Chinese from owning it.
That's what Trump's trying to do, as I understand. He's trying to find someone to buy the platform. Doesn't this, though, exemplify in a way, I believe, anyway, I want to get your thoughts, just one more example of really bad Democratic politics, right? They let Trump be the hero. They gave Trump the man who saved TikTok moniker. They didn't have to do that. Biden didn't have to sign the ban.
Well, but we know the Democrats don't do things very well, and they're suffering, they're paying a big price for all the mistakes they've made over the years. And now they have no power. So I don't know what they're going to do from going forward, but right now Trump's got all the power. He's got Congress, he's got the courts, he's got a lot of the media. So it's a bad time for Democrats.
All right, let's play this. This is from the inauguration today. I wasn't planning to spend a ton of time on the inauguration, but it is Inauguration Day. We've talked about the ceasefire, which to me is actually the most important story. But here's Trump, and I want to get your thoughts. I won't even really billboard this, except to say he's talking about the military under the Trump presidency. So let's go to the video. By the way, can you hear the applause? You can. You aren't hearing that, Arlen. Is that right? You didn't. Wow. Well, let me see if I can make sure you do, because we want to make sure you're hearing it. Hold on one second. I don't. You should be hearing that. I had this issue. Well, maybe it just wasn't. No, I think it was loud enough. Let me go to the. This is the kind of thing that drives me completely bats. And also, I'm sure the listeners really appreciate it as well. And now they can all see the settings, but we'll just watch me do this. Yeah, so microphone is line 2. So you should hear it, Arlen. It's going to line 2. Let's try this again.
Okay.
We'll go back to the Trump video, because I do have it going to 2. Oh, but maybe there's some issue here. All right, let's go.
Like in 2017, we will again build the strongest military the world has ever seen. We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into.
All right, so message of peace, Arlen. You can't be too upset about that, or maybe you are.
Well, it's probably expected from Trump, because he's trying to be the powerful leader and strong and have strong convictions. And so it's not surprising that he wants people to think that he's going to save everything, that he's going to, prevent all the wars and win everything. So, this is typical Trump.
Well, but still, he does pay lip service to getting out of wars. And we just saw a ceasefire. So I think, trying to be really fair, that's something to take with some degree of optimism.
Well, yeah, I'm willing to see what happens, and yeah, it's true. I don't see Donald Trump as a warmonger at all, and that's the good thing about him. The only good thing I can think of about him. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
For the people, the Trump haters out there, we'll get to some videos where you'll be able to indulge yourself a little bit. But just with respect to war, so Rubio, I like this. This is what I wanted to see. Russia and Ukraine must make concessions to end war. Rubio, having been this is for his confirmation hearing, having been a real hawkish guy, and that was an issue. A lot of the MAGA folks didn't like that. But he's going to push Ukraine as well as Russia, and that's not something we saw from Antony Blinken, right, Arlen? It was just like Israel, basically whatever Zelensky wants, he gets.
It was interesting, too, that the Republicans dropped one of their Congress people from a powerful position who was pro-Ukrainian, and I wonder if that is significant or not. Because of course, I hope that the U.S. backs Ukraine all the way. You're not so much with me on that, but that's another area, just like the Mideast, that maybe there's a chance for peace.
Well, you had said, though, that you kind of backed away a little bit in recent times from your pro-Ukraine war position. Have you reverted to it, to the old position?
No, I hate seeing all the killing, all the violence and everything, and I want the war to stop. It's just question is, what's going to happen when it stops? Who's going to, decide, what's going to happen to Ukraine? Is it going to be Putin, or is it going to be Zelensky? So, if they can come up with a decent compromise, then I'm all for it.
Well, again, then I think what Rubio said would be right in your wheelhouse. Both sides must make concessions.
If necessary, yeah.
I mean, I don't know how Ukraine doesn't make concessions, since 20% of their territory is now in Russian hands, and the Russian army is as badly hit as it's been, is in much better shape, as is the country, than Ukraine at this point.
Well, I don't know. I think Russia's been hurt very badly. They've lost a lot of, military weapons and things like that, and a lot of people have been killed. And Ukraine has been able to go over to Russia, which is surprising, and cause some damage and problems for the Russians there. So I don't think Ukraine is in that bad a position, but neither side is going to get everything they want, and I hope Ukraine can prevent Putin from taking over their country.
All right. I don't think that's in the cards. I don't think there's going to be an agreement that Ukraine is no longer a sovereign state. I think it's just a question of what territory, if any, becomes Russian and what territory is demilitarized. I think that's what they're going to be arguing about. And then there may be some question about some type of reparations, although I would be surprised. I think both sides are going to be kind of on their own to rebuild. Here is President Trump on one of my favorite topics, trade and tariffs.
I will immediately begin the overhaul of our trade system to protect American workers and families. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens.
So, any thoughts on that, Arlen?
Well, yeah, he wants tariffs, and a lot of his allies do too. But eventually, the American consumer is also going to be paying for that. Those tariffs are going to cost money, and the consumers are going to have to pay more. So we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad he brought this up. I was somewhat concerned Trump would back away from his pro-tariff position, which I think is essential in this world. That said, it's only words. We'll see whether the policies that he enacts are consistent. I understand the argument about prices. It's true. Tariffs do cause some price hikes. There's no question about it. But that said, they also generate revenue for the government. So to the extent that there are higher prices, those can be completely offset by tax rebates or other policies that refund money to the American consumer. We'll see if that happens. There's always going to be costs. You can't, but free trade has tremendous costs for the American worker especially, but also for consumers in the form of poor quality goods, more challenges returning or getting exchanges, and there's other factors as well. So, as you know, I'm a big supporter of tariffs. I was glad to hear Trump mention those. Not as bad, at least so far, as maybe some would have thought. Let's get to another topic where I think...
I have one more thing to say about that, and that is, as far as economics, I think what's most interesting to me is, will Trump continue to help those at the top of the pyramid, the rich people? Will he cut taxes for them? Will the poor people among us, the middle class, keep losing ground? Because the degree of inequality is the highest it's ever been, and if Trump can't do anything about that, then we're going to continue with the problems that we have.
That's a great point, Arlen. I didn't watch the entire speech by Trump. In fact, I wasn't really going to touch on it in particular. This is the one he gave today, his inaugural speech. But I was talking to somebody to whom I'm close, who brought it up, and I've got a clip in there that particularly upset that individual, and I think it is upsetting, and I understand why they were troubled by it. But they mentioned it, so I thought I'd go back and look at it. I didn't see him bring up taxes. He spoke for maybe 20, 25 minutes, I think, something like that. It wasn't super long, but I may well have missed the tax portion of it. He does say, though, and I didn't play all the tariffs part either, that the tariffs will be a tax on. He mentioned tariffs aren't, in my view, a true tax. It's lazy to call them that, but Trump calls them a tax on. He says he will also tax. He says he's going to impose tariffs and also tax foreign governments. So I don't know if there's something else he's contemplating. If you want to do business in the United States, you have to pay us, I don't know, something beyond the tariff. I don't know about that. But he does say that will be, implies, his language, as I understand it, he implies that will be a substitute for taxing Americans.
Well, Hal, what surprises me about what you said is that he only spoke for 20 minutes. I mean, that's really rare for Trump. And I wonder, why he spoke for so little time. Maybe it's traditional, or somebody got to him and said, hey, just go easy the first day and we'll see what happens. But yeah, Trump could go on for hours and hours.
Yeah, don't quote me on that 20 minutes. It may well have been a little longer, but it wasn't like an hour either. It was relatively short, and there were a lot of other folks talking too. And if someone posts 240-242-5646, by the way, I'm glad you could hear that audio, Arlen. I think the problem was there was an underlying applause that was a little low, and you may not have caught it. But once the speech began, so that's good. All right, let's get to Trump on immigration.
All illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came. We will reinstate my Remain in Mexico policy. I will end the practice of catch and release. And I will send troops to the southern border to repel the disastrous invasion of our country.
All right, thoughts on that, Arlen?
Well, it's kind of scary. Isn't exactly what he's going to do. I mean, he's saying some pretty grandiose things about, getting rid of the immigrants and all that. And that's really probably the biggest factor as to why he's president now, because, Biden and Harris got too sloppy about letting people in. And there's too many illegals in this country, and people know that, and they know that the Democrats didn't do enough to stop it. So now the question is, will Trump go to an extreme like he did before, where he's separating families and all that? We don't know, but it's going to be very interesting to find out.
I find this very troubling. I'm very concerned about this. This is one of the areas where I think Trump, was the worst thing he did, frankly, as president, was the separating families and putting people in those cages, which is what he did. And I understand, so did Obama. There's an argument there. Clearly, Trump took that policy and amped it up and put it on steroids and made things far worse. He talks about millions of criminals. I don't think the number is anywhere near that. Immigrants tend to be more law-abiding. There are absolutely horror stories. I'm not denying there are people who come across the southern border or the northern border from Europe, and they commit crimes, and it's bad. It's very bad, but it's also exaggerated for effect. It's also used by jingoism. He doesn't talk about the real drivers of immigration, which is the poverty and the crime that the United States exports. So I find this very worrisome. As the husband of a teacher, I know she's very concerned that some of the children and their families that she teaches could be at risk. Yeah. And I find this to be really reprehensible, frankly, from Trump.
I think what's going to be interesting is which illegal aliens is he going to try and deport? Are they the ones who are in the country illegally because they didn't do it the proper way, or are they going to actually go after criminals who may have robbed a store or something like that? It just depends on how many people and what they did, and we'll have to wait and see what he's going to do.
Yeah, you're watching Halitics, and that's another really good point, Arlen, because I understand, and I haven't followed this closely, but I understand from what my wife told me that Trump pulled back a little bit, or some of his spokespeople pulled back on their zero tolerance policy for anyone in this country without documentation to, well, we're really just going after the criminals. We're going after the people who committed crimes. I hope there's truth to that. I'm skeptical. Again, using numbers like millions, that's not people who are committing violent crimes. That's just hardworking people who are trying to survive in a very challenging environment. And I understand your point about immigration is a very good one. It was a big factor although a study came out, you may not have seen it, we'll talk about it in a moment, that wasn't the biggest factor in terms of Trump's win. It wasn't immigration, but I agree. But I think the problem is more that, as you mentioned, inequality is rising. Poor, struggling, working people do not feel, and I think they're correct, that they're getting a fair shake. And Trump offers them a scapegoat. I think it's the wrong scapegoat, but he does offer them a scapegoat, immigrants. And I think that did help him prevail. In fact, many Americans who are legally in this country but were not born here agreed with Trump's assessment. He got a high percentage of people who are in the legal immigrants and who are citizens, and also people who are maybe first or second generation in this country. Latinos, especially Latin men, voted for Trump. So it's a policy that has a lot of appeal. That doesn't mean I like it. I don't like it at all, but I understand why it is.
Let me ask your opinion on something, and I think this will be really important. Should Trump go after all the immigrants who were eating the pets of people in Ohio or whatever? I mean, that's another important thing we have to watch.
Well, I think there was one person who was alleged to have eaten a dog, and they have been deported, as far as I know. I don't. Otherwise, I'm not familiar with that, except for in Trump's imagination.
Of course, a lot of imagination.
So, Arlen, speaking of why Harris lost, and I have a Kamala Harris question for you before we get to the last video. But there was a recent study that came out, although it has some potential flaws, not perfect, that concludes that the biggest factor was the failure of Harris Biden to ever stand up to Israel.
Well, that's certainly a factor. And she never really separated herself from Biden hardly at all over anything significant. So I think that's part of the problem, because Biden wasn't popular. He was, he was too old, and he wasn't doing what he should have done, especially like with Israel. So, but you know how I did write an opinion piece. I think it'll be out in the next day or two, but I looked as to the reasons why Kamala lost. And I think it goes back about 50 years when Republicans started to really push for getting their ideas, their philosophies in the American society, with the Rush Limbaughs of the world and the Fox Newses and all that, and all the rich people. Now people like Elon Musk could spend as much money as they want to get their candidate elected. Like Musk spent like $250 billion, $1 million rather, or more, helping Trump get elected. And you could even give as much money as you want and not even disclose who is giving all the money. So, in other words, our democracy is no longer a democracy.
I think you're 100% right, Arlen. I would point out that the decline of the Democratic Party, I think, can largely be attributed to the influence of money as well, the corrupting influence of big money in our elections. The Republicans have been chased right by the Democrats because both now really have decided they're not going to pursue true pro-worker policies. Although Trump at least talks about workers, he discussed them in his tariffs, when he promoted tariffs. And I think this is an area where the Democrats made a terrible, terrible miscalculation, where they kind of ceded ground. They didn't have to. She didn't have to campaign, Arlen. When I say she, Kamala Harris did not have to campaign with Cheney. She could have gone. Tim Walz has far more working class cred than does Cheney, Liz Cheney, and she could have also gone out with labor leaders. She got a lot of labor endorsements. She didn't take advantage of those.
Yeah, she didn't do a bad job. She actually campaigned very well, I think. But her problem is, and then the Democrats' problem is, if they go after try to get support from the corporations, from the billionaires and everything like that, then they're going to lose the Republicans. Republicans are always going to get, their people in favor of rich people getting richer and richer. And so what are the Democrats going to do? I think the only way to save our democracy is public financing. You got to get money out of politics, out of elections. That's the only way I can think of where anything will change.
Yeah, of course, that's a chicken and an egg, because you can't get the money out of politics, because the people who are in power now are there because of money, and they'll never take the money out. So it becomes incredibly difficult. I think there have been some opportunities. There was an opportunity in 2016 with Bernie Sanders, and we lost that opportunity. And I even think in 2024, yeah, you're right. I mean, Democrats have to feel beholden to these billionaires, but they could exercise a little more independence than they do. They exercise virtually none. All right, here's a clip that I was actually brought to my attention, Arlen. This will be the last we play of Trump, but I do want to get your thoughts on this one. If you thought the last one was a problem, see what you think of this one.
8 years, I have been tested and challenged more than any president in our 250-year history. And I've learned a lot along the way. The journey to reclaim our republic has not been an easy one, that I can tell you. Those who wish to stop our cause have tried to take my freedom and indeed to take my life. Just a few months ago in a beautiful Pennsylvania field, an assassin's bullet ripped through my ear. But I felt then, and believe even more so now, that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again.
That's awful.
So that, go ahead.
I mean, we know about Trump, and he's always maintained his innocence with everything, even though, his record of crimes is well known and well documented, and he always, claims everybody's out to get him, and we know that's not true, and he was able to escape all, most of his charges other than those felonies in New York, and now he's, saying God's on his side. I mean, that's not good.
Well, I mean, you've called Trump a fascist. I don't think that's unreasonable. This is certainly from that playbook, right, where you declare that you're the scourge of God, you're the avatar of God, maybe not fascism even, but some type of totalitarian or theocracy. I'm not going to go take that too far, but it's certainly a problematic statement. And we'll see, how much freedom really does flourish. But when a leader claims that they're anointed to make the country great, you do have to really wonder about how much they're going to respect democratic norms.
And he also, maintained that his assassination attempt was due to, the other side. I mean, probably kind of implying that maybe it's the Democrats or the left that were trying to kill him. And that's really going far.
Yeah. I mean, I do think Trump was persecuted unjustly by the Democrats. I think they gave him, they didn't give him any opportunity. They did not try to work with him at any point. And I think that was wrong, just as it was wrong when Mitch McConnell did that to Obama. There are areas where I think you can work with Trump. We heard some of them from him today, but obviously that doesn't excuse his grandiosity, his narcissism either. All right, anything else before we move on? I want to get to the Christoph piece. I know one of your favorite columnists, Arlen, but we can even use the Christoph piece to leverage back into the Trump inauguration. But I'm just curious if, and I didn't play all the videos. I have one about the Green New Deal. I just didn't play it. Maybe I'll play it tomorrow. But basically, he's gutting the Green New Deal, which is another very, very problematic, wrong-headed, misguided, dangerous policy decision.
And by the way, Hal, I would disagree with you on whether he was persecuted by the Democrats. I think they should have been tougher on him in some ways. They waited too long to get him into court. He had all the judges on his side, the Supreme Court on his side. Merrick Garland was just too slow to get the charges, instituted. So I just don't think it's a case of the Democrats being too tough on him. I think they were too easy in some ways.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the Russiagate, which was clearly a figment of Hillary Clinton's overheated imagination, and
I disagree.
Again, failing to work with him at any point on some issues where I think they could have had some possible success. I know you disagree about Russiagate, even though there's never been any evidence tying Trump to Russia. So, I mean, if you want to claim it, go ahead. I understand. Well, your argument would be, and I don't want to belabor this, that Putin had a few guys in T-shirts in basements tweeting on social media. That's not Russiagate. Russiagate is that the Trump team conspired with Putin. That didn't happen.
Well, whether you call it conspire or not, I mean, there's plenty of evidence, and Congress did an investigation and said, yeah, the Russians did a lot of things to help Trump, and it's all on record. And
so why are you investigating Trump for that? That's not Trump. That's the Russians decide, and understandably so. They didn't want a war, and they got one when the Democrat took office.
Well, we know Trump's always been sympathetic to the Russians, to Putin. He said, from the beginning, I believe Putin more than anybody else. And, he was always very friendly to Putin. And I think that was wrong.
All right. Is 2025, Arlen, the best year to be alive?
I know Christoph does this a lot. He points out some very important factors, as far as there's less starvation, less poverty, less children, dying when they're young. But I think there's two things he doesn't talk about I think are really, really important. And that is, well, number one is climate change. You got a president now who's not going to do anything about climate change. Climate change could destroy this world because it's already done a lot of damage. Species are dying, and there's been a lot of damage to the environment. And the second thing I think might be even worse, and that is weapons of mass destruction. They've only gotten worse. More and more people are getting them, and they could easily destroy civilization. So, those two things, climate and weapons of mass destruction, have me very, very worried.
All right, Arlen, as usual, you are spot on. I would note this is, again, Halitics, so if you haven't yet, please click like, please click subscribe. And if you want to join us, you can, 240-242-5646. And you know what I forgot to do is I forgot to test my ringer. I got to do that because the ringer doesn't always work unless I test it a few times. So I got to do that. And also, Arlen, I haven't had you on in a while, so I'm kind of getting back in the swing of having a guest. But I do hope people, if they haven't yet done so, please click subscribe. And don't forget that Halitics on Facebook either. I think it's a really nice resource for us to, to chat off air. So, Arlen, you are right. He does talk about infant mortality, and that's a pretty important topic, I think.
Yeah, it's all true. That there is progress in a lot of areas. There's no doubt about it. I just wonder how long the civilization has, more than a generation or two before we're totally destroyed. And that's what scares me the most.
I'm with you on that, Arlen. He does mention, you threw out the child poverty. You threw out both the child mortality and poverty. So those were right there front and center. And I have to say that to me, and I mentioned as my little irony or sarcasm or whatever word you want to use on Facebook, that I'm not a glass half empty guy. I'm a glass completely empty guy. But when I look at these metrics, I think they're relevant. I really do. I mean, it is better. Look, human beings are human beings, and nobody wants their child to, except if you're a real sociopath, you want your child to live. And more babies are living. That's a really good thing. And I think, poverty is so life destroying. And we don't, I think, as a society, recognize how bad it is, how harmful it is, how destructive it is. In America, poverty rates are going up. But worldwide, and I think this is absolutely accurate. I did a little checking. I don't ever buy anybody without checking. Yeah, this is a good thing. Now, there are caveats, right? Maybe you're not definitionally in extreme poverty, but you're working 12 hours a day in a sweatshop. That's not much of an improvement, right? There's a lot, and that goes to partly your environmental issue, Arlen. But I have to at least consider these as relevant. He does talk about war a little bit, and even with war, even with Gaza, even with Congo, even with Sudan, apparently infant mortality and poverty is down.
Yeah, I don't doubt what he's saying. And he's right. There's been a lot of progress on these issues of, childhood poverty and all these things are right. And we have, historically, we are getting better in so many ways. But, what worries me are there's so many wars and the weapons are so, terrible. And, there's going to be people that don't want to use those weapons. That's what scares me. And if we don't, step up and do something about climate change, we saw what happened in California, all the wildfires. That's just one of, thousands of problems people are having with climate change.
Yeah, I mean, the sixth great extinction human caused is getting only worse. Arlen, though, here's one more metric. Literacy rates continue to increase. All right, so let's get you. Now, you mentioned the environment, you mentioned endless war. And to be fair to Christoph, who I think is one of your all-time favorites, he does bring that up. So here's his comment in his column. Climate change, growing peril, of course, but stunning improvements in solar, wind, nuclear, and other tech offer a credible path. Where do you fall on that one?
Well, I think he makes good points, and there are good things like that going on, and that may improve society. We don't know. We'll just have to wait. But I just worry about the really big ones that could destroy civilization. That's what.
This is that, right? This is the climate crisis that he's talking about, the climate holocaust, as I call it, and he's saying, hey, we can. We can invent our way out of it. I find that not persuasive, to be perfectly honest. I think the only way we can address the climate catastrophe is to consume less. We're not going to grow our way out of it with new advances. It's just not happening. We've had all these advances, and yet we continue to extract and consume more fossil fuels every year than the year before.
That's another issue that I think people don't think about or talk about, and that's overpopulation. There's just too many people on this globe, and they're depleting our resources. And it's everywhere you go to some like tourist attraction, like I've done, and everything's going to be crowded. There's going to be long lines everywhere. There are just too many people on this globe, and nobody's talking about it.
Too many people consuming too much per person, and in fact, that's, I guess, the cloud or the fly in the ointment of reduced poverty is people. If you're out of poverty, it means you're consuming more, and consumption is what's driving the climate catastrophe. It doesn't have to be that way. We could all have enough, but consume, but on average consume far less. But that's not the direction we're going.
No,
okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And one reason is just because the system, our capitalist system, demands profit, and to get profit, you have to have people consuming, what you're selling, and so that's going to be a problem in that area.
Okay, and 100% on that too. So you mentioned war, and Christoph does touch on war a number of times. He points out that, although it's not in this segment I just put up there, but he points out there is a ceasefire now in Gaza, and he's pleased with the deposition of Assad in Syria. I'm not sure that's going to work out so well. We'll see. I'm pretty skeptical of that. I am more optimistic that there will be peace in Ukraine. But he says, hey, looks like we're not going to get war with China after all. And Biden deserves credit for that because he put together this united front, the pivot to Asia. Any comment?
Well, there's just too many unknowns here. We don't know what Trump's going to do, how far, how extreme he's going to get, whether there will be opposition to him of any kind. Certainly doesn't. And also, media sources, like tech companies, are they going to be there and let people be objective and criticize, Trump and his policies. We just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I would note that I think that Christoph, who is a Trump hater as well, and before we get into where I think Christoph gets it wrong, though, Arlen, you really don't like Trump. You dislike him more than I dislike him, and I don't like him. Do you find it troubling or problematic at all that there's no one really in the New York Times who was a Trump supporter? I mean, this guy got more votes than Harris. Shouldn't the newspaper at least have some diverse viewpoint? I mean, they never had anyone who ever supported, as far as I know, Bernie Sanders.
Well, they do have conservatives on their, opinion staff, and that's okay. But there's just so many other sources of news that the Republicans have a pretty strong hold on. Especially all these right-wing TV networks, Fox, Newsmax, One America, and all that, and radio shows, and internet sites, and so there's not, that's not a problem for the right wing. They have plenty of.
Well, I don't mean for the right wing. I mean for you as a news consumer who does rely on the New York Times. Doesn't it cause you to question how objective they are? How much you can really truly rely on them to tell you all the news that's fit to print?
Well, I like the New York Times. I think they've built a reputation over the years, and I think they're pretty good. As far as their news items, they get things wrong, of course. Everybody does, but overall, I don't think there's a better newspaper around than the New York Times. I'll tell you what does bother me, though. MSNBC, which is considered the only good Democratic liberal source other than maybe CNN, never has anybody on the other side. They don't have any right-wing, Trumpies hardly at all, which at least Fox does give both points of view a fair chance sometimes. So I would like to see more of that coming from MSNBC, more conservatives, more Trumpies, and then we can, make our decisions better.
Well, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that because I never watch MSNBC, but that's a good point. So I put this back up. I showed it before. Christoph gives Biden credit for this common front to deter China, and I'm okay with that. I don't know enough about it to opine, but again, I think there's a little bit of an injustice to Trump, and here's why I say that, Arlen. I think a big reason China may be less of a risk or less dangerous to us is because they're economically in the doldrums. The China economy is not doing very well. And part of that may well be because of the Trump tariffs that did target China and did reduce to a degree our consumption of Chinese output. And Christoph doesn't mention that. I think he should.
Well, the Chinese are certainly manufacturing a lot of things and selling a lot of things like cars. So, they can recover, and they certainly are going to be a problem for us because of their population and, their aggression with the Xi and all that. We don't know. We just have to wait and see and hope we get the right leadership on that.
Arlen, you recommended a piece to discuss as well. I brought up the Christoph article, knowing again that he's somebody that you respect. So I wanted your take on it. And I was I wasn't really surprised when you said you didn't fully buy what he's saying. I don't either, but I thought it was thought-provoking. I thought he had some pretty interesting comments that I can't, think are fair. Even if I remain more pessimistic than maybe he is. You wanted to talk about this piece, and maybe we'll get to it, but I want to, again, I don't know if you feel like I'm putting you on the spot or not. I keep moving around. My legs are bothering me. You indicated on Facebook that you would be less troubled. Not that you wouldn't be troubled. You'd be less concerned about the future if the new president were Kamala Harris, not Donald Trump. And I'd like you to explain that. I'm not going to challenge you. I'm just going to ask you to explain why.
Only the fact that Kamala is if she's a Democrat, she's going to go along with the Democratic ideas and policies. And, they're not bad. We've done all right the last few years, even though Trump tries to make it sound like we're in horrible shape. But, economically, we're doing okay overall, although, obviously there are problems. But I think mainly I like Kamala Harris because Trump, I think, is the worst possible president we could ever have. He doesn't tell the truth. He doesn't know much. He makes bad decisions, and that's what scares me the most.
Well, let's just hope he's not as bad as you fear. I won't get into arguing that point. I think there's good reason to be worried about a President Trump, a second term. You did recommend this article. Why did it pique your interest, Arlen?
Well, there is a division in the Republican Party in the Trumpites between these tech titans, all those rich billionaires, the Zuckerbergs, Elon Musk, and Bezos, and all that. And can they get along with the traditional MAGA people who are not as interested in tech issues, but are more interested in economic issues as far as their lives and many other areas. And it'll be interesting to see who eventually comes out on top, or if they could coexist together. But there are some differences. I mean, some of those tech people are former liberals, and they have some good ideas. But certainly, MAGA is going to push back on a lot of that.
So, I'm hearing that you're a little more sympathetic to the billionaires than the working class Republicans. Is that fair to say?
No, it's not. I don't like any of them.
Well, I was playing with you there a little bit, but you did say some of the tech bros were former libs, and so I thought you were implying a certain sympathy for their view, their pro-immigration position, especially with regard to this H-1B visa program. But elucidate then. Tell me what you think.
They basically surrendered. They no longer are willing to stand up to the president, and they're giving him money. They're doing what he's asking for. Like Zuckerberg is, allowing Facebook to say anything they want, whether it's true or not, or how awful or hateful it is. They're all just, giving him everything he wants, and they're trying to curry favor with him. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I don't think it is.
Yeah, I certainly don't like it. With regard to that, I mentioned H-1B visa program. That's a major point in this dispute, right? Is between the sort of the MAGA, the working class folks who you would see at many of the Trump rallies wearing, the Trump. Some might even have like a Trump hair piece on or something of that sort, versus these billionaires who have been acting behind the scenes, although obviously Musk front and center with his DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, and others. The H-1B visa program is a very sore point between them because the MAGA are the xenophobes. They're the ones who don't want immigration. They don't want immigrants sometimes for very legitimate reasons. The immigrants are more labor. And when you raise the supply of any input, you reduce its price. So when you raise the supply of workers, you reduce the wages that you have to pay those workers because they're competing against each other for scarce work. So that's a very reasonable position, I think, if you're working class. I think the problem is the reason those people are coming to this country, the workers, immigrants, is because their life sucks in their countries because of what the United States is doing. The tech bros have a very different priority. Their priority is we want inexpensive labor and highly educated, qualified American engineers can charge a hell of a lot of money to us. We got to pay them a lot to do the coding and the programming. It costs us a ton. And if we can import a bunch of English speakers from India, where there's almost it's the largest country in the world population-wise, they're educated, they're English speakers, but they're living in poverty and they would love to come to the United States, and they'll work for $20, $30, $40 an hour versus $150 an hour. So we can really leverage their numbers to reduce our wages. That's the argument from Musk. Obviously, that doesn't sit well with MAGA. Any thoughts?
Yeah, we're living in a kind of an unstable time where people are moving all over the place because conditions are really bad and people are starving or getting killed by, cartels and all that. So people are moving back and forth between countries. I know it's a real problem in Europe. They're not used to having all these minorities, and there's been some reaction to that. Some of the countries are turning right, just like the United States is. So, I don't, it's going to be a problem, and, who's on top, who do we want, who do we not want? And we'll be fighting about that, I think, for a long time.
Well, I'm more sympathetic to the workers. I'm more sympathetic to the Steve Bannons who say this isn't right. We should not be providing these H-1B visas. I do believe in immigration. I think we need to have immigration reform. I think there should always be a path to citizenship. H-1B visas don't really provide that. H-1B visas are temporary work permits where we bring in, where the Disney, which has used them in the past, but now obviously Facebook and Tesla and others bring in workers. They don't necessarily have a path to citizenship. They can apply for a green card, but an H-1B visa does not, of its own, provide you with an opportunity to become a citizen. It's only if your sponsor, your company sponsor, your company that brought you in sponsors you, is the only way you can get that green card. And many of them won't. After a few years, they'll send you back to where you came from, and they'll bring in somebody else because they don't want you to be a citizen. That doesn't provide them with any benefits. I don't like the H-1B visa policy. That was a Hillary Clinton. She championed it. It was a big reason she lost in 2016. I just have one other point here, Arlen, and I show this up here. The author of the piece, James Pogue, appears, though he tries to be a straight shooter, I think he's clearly sympathetic again to the tech bros, to the H-1B visa. He calls it a bilious, meaning nausea-inducing debate. There's the MAGA people are just motivated solely by racism or xenophobia. But he also diminishes or tries to reduce the argument of the folks who say we shouldn't have those H-1B visas, say, well, they care about pre-1960s America, the values of the West. But I would say maybe they just care about getting paid a living wage. Maybe they just want to be in a society where work is fairly valued.
Yeah, no question that other countries have some very smart people, very talented people, and a lot of the people in America want to have them working for their companies. So, but then again, there's others who, do the easy jobs, the low wage jobs. With all the changes, with all the instability, I think it's going to be a constant problem for a long time as to, who do we favor, who do we not favor? And it'll be tough to solve.
All right, Arlen, before we let you go, it's been the hour. We're through the hour. Do you have any final words, anything that you had been hoping to comment on? And I don't know if you want to talk about your recent trip at all, any takeaways that maybe we can use to help us understand better our current situation in this country.
It's amazing, all the history over there. I mean, we make a big deal out about something that's 50 or 100 years old, and here, they have buildings that are hundreds of years old. So it's a totally different kind of a place. But another thing we haven't talked about, Hal, is football, and that's getting very exciting. We're down to 4 teams now in the NFL, and we have a college national championship tonight. So
we do, and I have a couple of thoughts. I'm glad you brought up football real quick. First of all, given the hardships that California has been facing, I think it is unfortunate that the Golden State does not have a team in the Final Four. The Rams losing to the Eagles, right? So that was your last team, was the LA Rams. The Chargers lost in the first playoff round to the Houston Texans. and the 49ers did not make the playoffs this year.
I think the biggest surprise of all is the Washington Commanders, that they're in the Final Four. That was a surprise. I think the other teams are, going to be very good, and it's anybody's guess of who's going to come out on top of it. But most likely, Kansas City surely should be favored. They have.
Well, my family is all rooting for the Washington Football Club, except for me. My habit has been to root against them since the prior owner took power back in, I think, the last millennium. He was horrible. He was a bad person. He was a bad owner. The team's name was racist. They've shed a lot of that. I don't like the new name. I don't like Commanders, but it's a heck of a lot better than what they had before. I was calling for Red Wolves from the beginning. I think they should have used Red Wolves. If they were called the Red Wolves, I would be rooting for them. That said, I do like the team. I think their quarterback, they have a rookie, Jaden Daniels. He's been awesome. He's great. There's nothing about that team not to like. So I'm fine with them going into the championship of the NFC game against the Eagles. I will be rooting for the Philadelphia Eagles, that said. And I'd like to see a change. I'm sure you feel the same way. It would be nice to see the Bills rather than the Chiefs, which I don't like that name either. It's not quite as bad, though. But I'd like to see the Bills representing the AFC. Your thoughts on that?
It's hard to imagine Taylor Swift and Kelsey and Mahoney's losing. That would be a big surprise, I think. So it'll be a great Super Bowl if any of those teams are in it. So that'll be February 9th, by the way.
I did not have the date, but your point about Kelsey Mahomes is a good one, because I was thinking the same thing. Travis Kelsey did not have a good season. He had a great playoff game against who did they beat? I can't remember now who they were playing. Wasn't the Ravens. The Ravens lost to the Bills in a great game. They beat C.J. Stroud and the Texans, and I was disappointed. I would have loved to see the Texans win that game. I like C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud is probably going to be at the championship game tonight. He was an Ohio State grad, or at least he played for Ohio State. And you know who else is going to apparently be there, Erlen? The new vice president, who is also an Ohio State graduate.
Oh, and I didn't know that. And I'm certainly not a fan of the vice president, but if he wants to watch the game, all the more power to her.
J.D. Vance said, excuse his absence from the inaugural balls. He will be at the national championship game against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Do you have a preference between those two teams, the Buckeyes or Notre Dame?
I don't. They both are established teams with good histories, and I have no idea who's going to be better, but I'm going to watch the game.
I'll be surprised if Ohio State doesn't win. I think they're the class of college football. Arlen, thank you. It's been great to talk to you. I'm so glad you reached out and pushed to be on, because I had thought originally you might be taking an extra week to come on.
Well, it's January 20th. It's the first day of the Trump administration, and it's the first day of our 4-year national nightmare. So that's why I wanted to be here.
Are you fully, by the way, acclimated to the West Coast time zone? I thought you'd want to go early, because after all, it's bedtime by now in Italy, or close to it. It's 9 o'clock.
Yeah, it took a few days, Al, but I think I'm back on track now.
Well, the nice thing is when you go east to west, you gain time. It's much easier to go from Europe to the U.S. or from the East Coast to the West than the other way around.
I'm just glad to be in a place where I understand the climate and it's reliable, and I can tolerate it.
At least until it falls into the ocean. All right, Arlen, we'll see you in a week, and we'll have more information about the new Trump administration at that point. Thanks, everybody, for watching, and I look forward to talking to you tomorrow. I know Arlen will be with us in 1 week. Thanks, Arlen.
Oh, my pleasure.